Hey guys, Jules from What Culture here, and I want to talk to you today about terrible video games, or more specifically, about terrible video games made by actually really decent developers. Now, looking at the current climate, you'd think that the likes of Naughty Dog, Telltale, and DICE have always been golden boys and girls of the industry. Well, today they might be the kids running the schoolyard with their shiny Charizards, or more applicable, youthful thing that's going on at the moment. Back in the day, some of these kids were the bespectacled kids who wet themselves, were fed dirt, and beaten with cricket bats at lunch. God, I miss school. So let's turn back the time and look at when these devs done dropped the ball. With this in mind, I'm Jules from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 terrible video games made by amazing developers. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 8, HAZE, Free Radical. After the Time Splitters series had put them on the map, Free Radical looked to team up with Ubisoft for their next big project. HAZE was touted as a Halo killer, which was pretty much the thing that everyone was gunning for back in the mid to late 2000s, but this really wasn't a challenger to the throne. In fact, thanks to its own publicity and the way it handled things, was more of a court jester. The game had an amazing premise as well, that soldiers were being pumped full of this mind-altering drug while fighting, which meant that they bypassed all of the horrors of war, only for one of them to learn the truth and start fighting back. It could have been like Spec Ops: The Line, but with a sci-fi setting, and you tell me that doesn't sound good. Yet when the title actually dropped, it was, much like its namesake, quite a confused and muddled mess. It's not the worst game by any stretch of the imagination, but after the likes of Time Splitters, this was a huge disappointment, and one that unfortunately did lead to the closure of the studios. On a side note, give me Time Splitters remastered. Thank you, please. Number 7, Star Fox Zero Platinum Games. Now, I hate bagging on Platinum Games almost as much as I do Star Fox, but let's face it, Star Fox Zero was not a fitting return for the space furry. The prioritizing of terrible gimmicky controls over actual gameplay is this title's downfall, and it's so frustrating as there really is a fun game here, but it's just buried by immersion-breaking moments. It's also really short, meaning that if you do actually finally get into the swing of things, it's over before you know it. Platinum Games have always prided themselves on delivering spectacle in their action games. I mean, just see Vanquish and Wonderful 101 for an example, but this just felt unpolished in nearly every area. Add in some iffy level design as well, and this was not a fitting return for Star Fox, which is a big shame. Number 6, Shrek, DICE. So DICE are pretty well known for making fantastic online multiplayer titles, but Shrek, much like their launch servers, was a fucking mess. I mean, what more do you want on this? It's Shrek, it was a terrible platformer, it sold really badly and just screamed that this is being done for a paycheck from the developers. I'm done. Ogre and out. Number 5, CSI Fatal Conspiracy, Telltale. So the Telltale that most players know nowadays, the one that create massive story-branching gameplays with tons of morality choices and all of the emotional weight of a truck, only really got its momentum when the first Walking Dead season came out. Before then, the studio was struggling to find its pace, releasing kind of similar stuff like the Jurassic Park one, but that was pretty bad. It also had a hand in the CSI games. The CSI games. Some of them had charm, some of them were just okay. But CSI Fatal Conspiracy? That was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. This game was less like solving crimes with your friends from the show and more like hanging out with a bunch of aliens who had no idea what constituted as acting. I've seen better deliveries in pornos. Which actually reminds me, by the way, tell your mum I'm gonna give her a ring later to sort out the follow-up trilogy. There's my one-per list. Number 4, Aliens Colonial Marines, Gearbox Software. So with the likes of the Brothers in Arms series and the mighty Borderlands franchise under your belt, you would have thought that Gearbox would have had a big fat swagger on. And they did so up until a point with Aliens Colonial Marines. When the pre-release footage came out, fingers were up. The aliens terrifying and the atmosphere looked more bleak than the dark web. Things were shaping up pretty well. Yet when this game dropped, it was an absolute stinker with terrible graphics, laughable gameplay, and things got so heated in the end that there was a public investigation into Gearbox where people said that they were trying to siphon off money from that project to fund Borderlands 2. Cheeky little monkeys. Number 3, KANE and LYNCH 2 Dog Days. IO Interactive. This one is just sad, really, because IO really wanted to push KANE and LYNCH. They wanted to build a franchise around them, but unfortunately, the fans nor the critics really followed suit. While the original effort was at least a pretty solid, if uninspired third-person crime shooter, the sequel was disappointing in every single way. Now, hands up, I actually quite liked some of the aesthetic, even though it did make me feel absolutely motion sick while playing it, but I did like the grubbiness of it all. The problem that I had with it, though, was its gameplay, which felt about as intuitive as punching rusty nails to punch buttons and just contracting tetanus. No thanks. It was simply infuriating, and the shooting for some reason was about as accurate as saying that I look Jamaican. It was a total slog in every sense and riled up the public so much that the series has been dead in the water since. Number 2, Way of the Warrior, Naughty Dog. When it comes to blockbuster games, very few people have been as successful as Naughty Dog. Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, The Last of Us. You've probably heard of them. They're all up there as some of the highest regarded video games of all time. Way of the Warrior was not. This was from a time when the studio was trying to attract bigger funding from larger companies, and it f***ing shows. It was a Mortal Kombat clone and nothing else, without any real defining moments of its own. Well, I mean, they did have a character called Snaky Jake, but that doesn't count. Unsurprisingly, this reviewed and sold poorly. And number 1, Call of Juarez, the Cartel, Techland. Now, I know this is sure to annoy a few people, but I goddamn hated the Cartel version of this franchise. I actually quite liked the previous games in it, though, which made it even more of a disappointment when, for some reason, they switched the thing from being it's a Wild West game for the first ones, and now it's set in modern day. No one asked for that. Apart from Ubisoft, which actually forced Techland to do it, because they were like, please save this franchise. And they were like, okay, that sounds great. And they said, with the proviso that you do it like this. Brilliant. Well, they went on to make Dying Light, though, so at least Techland showed that they do have some creative chops when it counts. The end result was just as dreadful as everyone expected. The story focused on ugly characters doing ugly things in ugly levels, making for an experience that seemingly detested any form of fun. And the only cool mechanic that it had, where characters had secret objectives that they had to do without the other players noticing, was not used in any significant way. And it's a real shame, because if they ever picked up this series, that's something that I'd like to see carried forward. However, this game pretty much shot itself in the foot and then shot itself in the head. And there we go, those are 8 terrible video games made by pretty awesome developers. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below, as well as any other suggestions that you may have. I might steal them for another list, because I'm a bloody vulture. Anyway, go back to whatculture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day, or you can follow me at RetroJ with a 0 on Twitter if you want to. You don't have to. I'm not gonna force you. Anyway, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye! Oh, wasn't that something? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe below, and also the people who made this lovely video, they're appearing right here. But if you're thinking to yourself, I want to see more content, Jules, then why not look above my head, as there probably is some. I don't know. I can't see it. Until next time.